Jump rope is a form of preparedness. It might sound cheesy, but if the world we know changes in the blink of an eye, the ability to think nimbly and move quickly may become two of our greatest strengths. Be prepared is the Boy Scout motto. The older I get, the more I agree with the wisdom in that simple phrase. In a world of war and chaos, preparedness is not just about stockpiling food or planning for disaster. It is also about training the body and mind to handle uncertainty. I did not always look at training this way. In the beginning, bodybuilding was the only thing on my mind. Nothing was more important than a shredded physique and a heavy deadlift. Do not get me wrong, I still want to look good. But now, in my mid-30s, with a family, my focus on fitness has shifted. What once started as chasing appearance slowly turned into something else. It became about preparing for life, not just preparing for the mirror. For me, that shift really began back in 2020. I think a lot of us were changed by that period. Do you remember when we were told that sitting at home and not exercising was the best thing for our health? That was the moment I realized the people making the rules could not be trusted. That period pulled back the curtains for me. It made me question authority figures and the systems they operate within. At the same time, with the gym shut down, I found myself moving differently. I went on a journey with Mary Jane, and we stretched for long periods of time, sitting in deep stretches for 5 to 6 minutes. New levels of mobility were unlocked, but what started as long stretching sessions turned into something much bigger. I began to realize mobility is more than flexibility. It is more than opening the hips or loosening the hamstrings. Mobility can be anything in life that expands you physically and mentally. That simple thought transformed the way I train. Structure is essential, but structure should never become restriction. That is why mobility is one of my 6 key pillars. Mobility expands the way we move, and as we move through different planes of motion and discover the body in new ways, we also challenge the brain to build new patterns of coordination and awareness. You could call mobility a pre-foundation, expanding before solidifying. Between my experience as a professional in the fitness world and my deeper academic studies into psychology and human behavior, I started to get more curious about the relationship between movement and the way we live. It is well understood that each hemisphere of the brain is connected to movement on the opposite side of the body, and that the central nervous system relies on neuronal connections to carry out what the brain is asking the body to do. Beyond movement alone, different parts of the brain also influence how we process emotions, regulate stress and hormones, and interact within our environments. Following that curiosity, I dove into a book that explored differences in human experience based on which hemisphere is more dominant. Much of that research drew from stroke patients who lost function in one of those hemispheres, which gave incredible insight into how each hemisphere shapes the way we view the world and act within it. Based on interpretations from The Matter with Things by Ian McGilchrist, the right and left hemisphere of the brain do not simply handle different tasks. They relate to the world in different ways. The right hemisphere is more connected to context, creativity, emotion in the bigger picture. Rather than isolating parts, it helps get a sense on how things fit together. That is why mobility resonates with me as more than a physical quality. Mobility reflects that exploratory side of the brain and of life itself. It is where new ideas are introduced, where possibilities open up, and where we reach beyond what is already familiar. But exploration is only one phase. That is what brought me back to the rest of the system. In time, I learned mobility is only the beginning. After expanding mobility, the body must solidify stability, structurally align, and develop strength. Before reaching the next pillar I want to discuss, power. The 5th pillar. Power is when the mind and body are focused, sharpened, and functioning with peak levels of movement, balance, and energy. Power is the season for executing actions with strength and authority. But power only exists once movement has been refined. It is not just force, it is force with control, force with precision, and force that can actually be applied when the moment demands it. Power is what happens when the body no longer wastes motion. It is when intent, rhythm, and balance begin working together. This is when we feel explosive, when we have bursts of energy ready to be directed. Not random energy, usable energy. Applied energy. The kind of energy that allows a person to move with authority under pressure. Energy is one of our greatest lifelines. It can be enhanced through sleep, food, and supplements like creatine, with sleep being the lead component. But once fueled, the real question becomes, how do we direct that energy? What are we building with it? What are we standing for? What are we preparing for? Each decision impacts us in more ways than we sometimes imagine. Small choices can evolve into bigger consequences. And that is part of why 2020 was such a massive turning point, not just personally, but collectively. It was one of the greatest shifts in human perspective of our lifetime, and we are still feeling the impact on a grand scale. The world changed politically and split a once unified nation. People started questioning institutions, narratives, and the future itself. Whether that shift was driven by fear, awakening, or some combination of both, it changed how we view reality. And once people no longer trust the systems they've been given, they start looking beyond them. They begin revisiting ideas that have may once been dismissed. It becomes easier to inspect thoughts that once sounded too strange or too abstract. Whether or not you believe in astrology, I think we can all agree that the cycles of the moon affect the tides of the ocean. And if we can consider that truth, then maybe there are larger patterns or energetic poles connected to the planets moving within our solar system. For those curious how the planets could have any relevance, Pluto in Aquarius is believed to mark a 20-year transformational shift, restructuring society as we know it, and demanding the end of authoritarian systems we have been controlled by. Now, whether you love Trump, hate Trump, or are simply watching to see what comes from his relentless and often reckless style, what cannot be denied is the seismic shift in perception that has occurred since he regained office. Regardless of political allegiance, the emotional tone of the country has changed. People are calling to end decade-long alliances. The elite are being exposed as pedophiles. And through all of this, we, the common people, are somehow still expected to sit back and believe more propaganda. But at a certain point, it all starts to feel like propaganda. What is real anymore? Too much has happened. Too much has been revealed. Which is why I want to come back to the idea of preparation. And that brings us back to the jump rope. On the surface, jump rope just looks like cardio. It looks like movement. It looks simple, but there is something more. It is staying nimble while maintaining rhythm. It is coordination. It is discipline under fatigue. It is the perfect combination of mobility and power. And that is why it matters far beyond fitness. Because what if the future does bring something extreme? What if the grid shuts down and we are forced into survival mode? That is not the time to get into shape. That is not the time to build discipline. That is not the time to suddenly develop stamina and adaptability. Those qualities have to be practiced before they are needed. Those who have been preparing will last far longer than those who plan to start tomorrow. No, jump rope will not make you invincible. But it does train something deeper than cardio. It trains rhythm under pressure. It trains the ability to stay light, sharp, and responsive when the body wants to slow down. And in unstable times, that matters. Because mobility gives us range and adaptability, and power gives us the focused energy to act. And in a world that feels increasingly uncertain, those may become two of our greatest allies.